Jim and I started taking piano lessons from Mrs. Hallett in Glenwood, Minnesota. We started at the same time. My parents bought a used piano, and they were going to get their money's worth out of it by getting a couple kids going right away on piano lessons. So we started with the Thompson series piano books, John Thompson, and beginner book, and pretty soon we found out we were going to be in a recital, so we had to get pieces worked up to be in the recital. Well, that was no problem for Jim because music came really fast for him. So his practice amounted to a 2-minute intermission at the piano, and off he was on something else. I would sit there and plug away for a longer period of time. But this went on for a couple of years, and all of a sudden I realized that Jim was in book 3 or 4, and I was still in book 1 or 2, and I decided I wasn't going to be keeping up with Jim. So I let him continue on with the piano lessons. He became quite good at the piano, although that was not his preference to play piano. So we started singing early on when we were in grade school, and Jim and I became members of the Methodist Church Youth Choir, and there's a picture to accompany that event where we were dressed up in our choir robe, regalia, and so it was a good experience where we learned to sing and play with a larger group, and we moved on from there into high school experience. And Jim sang tenor, and he was a tenor for our quartet. And there's also another picture that shows our quartet. Quartet was pretty good. We went to district competition as a group, and evidently we were good enough that the prom committee decided that we would be able to sing at the prom event. Well, this was an interesting development because Jim and I, neither one of us had a date, and my mom insisted that we both have dates if we were going to go to the prom. So we ended up trying to figure out how we were going to do that, but we each ended up asking a girl to go to the prom, and then we ended up singing at the prom as part of the entertainment. From the vocal music, we went on to instrumental music starting in junior high, and Jim was a natural at playing the trumpet, and he thoroughly enjoyed playing the trumpet. When he joined the varsity band, I think he was a freshman, and it didn't take him long, and he was already moved up to the second chair. He was that good. One time I remember that they were going to have the trumpets were going to have a sectional, and so they were going to have the sectional at the school. It turned out that the school was closed. It was locked, and I think it was Ralph Femright, and Jim figured out how to get into the school, even though it wasn't open. So they got in through a window. It's basically breaking and entering into a schoolhouse in order to have a musical sectional. My dad, Jack Carlson, was a principal, and he was in the school, or came to the school to make a tour of the facility and make sure everything was all right, and he heard music. Couldn't figure out why there was music coming from the band area, and showed up there to find his son and some other kids playing music. Our band was invited to perform at the Minnesota Music Educators meeting and their conference in Minneapolis at the Calhoun Hotel, and that was quite an event. We were asked to put on a demonstration piece for all of the band directors in the state of Minnesota, and we did a bang-up job. We both started out with paper routes, and that meant delivering the paper in the afternoon at that time. And then when the afternoon schedule became too difficult with school activities, we switched to morning routes. So we would get up early in the morning and go down to the paper office, pick up our papers, and then just wait around for the bakery to open up. And the bakery would sell us all of their secondhand or their day-old pastries. And Jim was first in line. He really liked to eat pastry and donuts in particular. And so it was a fun time delivering papers. Golf was a favorite of Jim's. Jim was a good golfer, very good golfer, and he really enjoyed playing golf. He was on the golf team and in high school, and did a great job playing golf for the high school team. That moved on, and later on, at his high point, he was playing 18 to 27 holes of golf a day, and he just had a tremendous number of hole-in-ones. I think scores. He had, I think, over 20 hole-in-one scores while he was golfing. Jim had earned enough money to buy a car, which he needed to get back and forth between Glenwood and Morris. And his car was a 53 Plymouth. It was a beautiful car in great shape, just a really well taken care of car, four-door sedan. And one day in the dead of winter, one of his friends was unable to get his car started and asked Jim if he would give him a battery boost. And so Jim said sure. So Jim pulled his 53 Plymouth up to this fellow's frozen vehicle, and they were going to attempt to start it by hooking up the battery cables. And evidently his friend hooked the cables up backwards, and it blew the battery up in Jim's car. There was probably a bunch of pieces. Jim said at the time he didn't think there were any pieces that were any larger than a quarter, which is quite an explosion.